Hi, welcome. This is session 3 for me, so apologies if you've heard my dulcet Belfast tones for the last couple of days. Today, I'm going to attempt to tell you how to source 4 huge categories in 40 minutes. So it's going to be a whistle-stop tour, but just to give you the key principles of what is important when sourcing in these categories. A little bit about who we are. My name is Anna Berry, and I was head of buying at John Lewis. I spent 33 years there, and 3 of my colleagues and I set up Retail 100 Consulting just under 2 years ago. And we're all ex-John Lewis, and we are called Retail 100 Consulting because we have 100 years of retail experience between the 4 of us. So we have been around the block a few times. We have sourced all of the categories that I'm going to talk about today. And in fact, we have sourced every category that is in the department store group. So there is no category we do not know well. Now, sourcing is really complex. I spoke yesterday about sourcing in a volatile world, and in fact it's getting more complex given the geopolitical situation we're in and given the agility that you need to have if you're going to source well. The key common thread through all of the categories I'm going to talk about today is that you need to be really clear on what you're sourcing, why and where, and who your customer is. So define who your customer is, what price point you're going to pitch your product as, what the range is going to be that you want to source, the quality of that range and the standards you need to achieve, the cost targets and the balance between cost and quality and the volume that you're going to drive, and then the lead times and how quickly you need to get that product into your hand, because that is the tricky bit, is actually getting it from A to Z and actually making a profit at the end of it. So the first category we're going to talk about is toys, and toys is really crucial on toys, given that you're genuinely sourcing for people below, it's getting younger and younger, the toy market, because kids have iPhones at 4 now, I believe. So you need to be really clear about the age at which you're sourcing, and the regulations for sourcing toys, quite rightly, are incredibly stringent. So make sure before you go into any sourcing on toys that you have done your due diligence on the factories you are going to, and that you are aware of the rules and regulations that apply to sourcing those products. Particularly if a child is below 3, there's all sorts of issues with the paint, if it's a wooden product, the fact that the child doesn't put it into its mouth, the chemicals that are used, hazards, whether the warnings all have to be marked in English, and the fact that it genuinely is a toy. And there is more extreme regulation coming on the toys category in December this year, so just be aware that the regulations move. Use government websites to make sure before you even start that you have a real understanding of how it will work. So toys is a really sensitive category, but also obviously an incredibly fun category to source. And with John Lewis, we had huge toy market. But what we noticed in my tenure at John Lewis was that the age of the toy customer was much younger than it had been, because children grow up very, very quickly. So entice children into your category, you need to innovate and have great products to get your female customers, who are very much the family customers of John Lewis, shopping in the toy environment. It's also an incredibly cutthroat market. The margins are low, so innovation and sourcing the right product is very, very important in this category. So starting with the key volume players, China's the biggest global producer of toys, and you can kind of get everything you know. They have unbelievable manufacturing capabilities, and they're known for the electronic toys, plastic toys, plush and educational toys. Really make sure that if you are sourcing in China that you have done your QC and your due diligence. Work with seals. I don't know, in John Lewis we would have a red seal for the first seal on quality and a gold seal for the final seal. In toys it's absolutely critical that you have covered that. And one example of where briefing of what you need is really, really critical. And also think about the sustainability elements of toys and how they're packaged and all of that wraps into, because these are very, very tough for the toy categories as well. In terms of Vietnam, Vietnam has got lower costs than China. We were talking yesterday in sourcing quite a lot about tariffs and the impact that tariffs are going to have, particularly if Trump gets in America. They're going to really hit the Chinese tariffs even higher than they are now, and that will have a knock-on impact for China. And a number of people are moving and switching to Vietnam, and Vietnam is an area which is really growing in toys as well. So while it's less about volume, it's about very high quality toys and a great range of product, and they do much more in the education and plush than you will see in China. So really 2 big powerhouse countries where you can source toys. In terms of wooden and educational toys, this is a huge category and a going category. So the age below sort of 3, 4, educational, early learning, these toys are really big. And in terms of environmental, again, a really growth category for toys. So those eco toys are really, really growing in popularity, as are toys that educate our children in this way. India is particularly good for wooden toys and eco-produced wooden toys with very, very high ethical standards. I mentioned yesterday we work with an amazing sourcing company. So if you're a small supplier and you're starting out, we work with a company called Kalara. I'm happy to give anyone the details. They're very new on the block, but they are backed by Reliance, which is the biggest company in India, and it's a bit like having your own sourcing office to do it for you. And they have over 1,000 factories they have access to in India, Bangladesh, Indonesia, Vietnam. Very high ethical standards, and toys is one of their key categories that they do very well, particularly the eco-friendly wooden toys. So thinking about the quality of what you're going to have on toys, and they also have lower labor costs. Indonesia has very high quality wooden toys and handcrafted toys, and again, Thailand is all very much about the cost and quality balance. So before you do it, and I said this yesterday when I was talking about sourcing, look at websites, look at government websites, look at what these are good at. Another good top tip is to look at retailers that you really admire, and now because of transparency, you can kind of tell which factory retailers are going to. If you go onto H&M, if you go onto Zara, if you go into John Lewis, you can actually find out the factories. On Zara and H&M, which I do frequently, you can actually click on the product, look down, look at factory, and it'll tell you where it's produced. You can then investigate that factory. There is another company I mentioned yesterday which is growing in importance, and it's called Fabacus, Fabacus. And this is a company founded by Andrew Zaney, who is the founder of Nobody's Child. And this is a QR code that goes onto product. So I was talking with Suzanne from Hive this morning that fashion are kind of 18 months ahead in terms of transparency and visibility. And the QR code that you look at will actually tell you what factory it came from, how many people work in that factory, how it's ethically sourced, is it SEDEX, how it's produced. It might even tell you who made it. So you can get real transparency now in product, and that is coming through to other home categories in the future. So definitely something to look out for. In terms of sort of more educational and STEM toys, so those of you in this category would know that STEM stands for science, technology, engineering and maths. These were huge categories for us at John Lewis, and very, very big sort of categories for educational toys for children, because people want their children to learn when they're using these toys. And they're geared towards that. Germany has exceptional quality in this space, as is Japan. Japan is free trade as well as a trade agreement, so it doesn't cost you in terms of tariffs, and the quality of what you'll get on robotic and educational toys from Japan will be second to none. Clearly those are at more mid to premium price points, so understanding where you're sourcing and what you need from that will dictate which country you will go to. But those are two amazing countries in that category. They have very high-end premium. Okay. So I'm conscious I'm going to go quite quickly because we have quite a lot to cover, but this will be available, this recording, if anybody needs any information, and you can ask me questions after as well. So the second category I'm going to cover is candles. Now, if you walk this show and you walk any show, there are thousands of candle brands. It is really difficult to have a USP in candles. It's a bit like the beauty world where I spend quite a lot of time as well. There are millions of brands, millions of different ranges, lots of places where you can source candles. So actually having a very clear USP on what you want to do on candles is important. It's also growing in terms of sustainability. So you can see that lots of new candles are coming in that are soy or wax or whatever. In terms of them competitively prices, thinking about how you can differentiate yourself with maybe the votive, so what the candle is in. And there are lots of ranges of candles, from tea lights at one price point right up to premium candles from Cire Trudon at hundreds of pounds, which my husband always equates to burning money, which it actually is. But there's a huge demand for mid to premium candles as well because of the growth and well-being and how it makes you feel. And in terms of gifting, enormous. It was an enormous category for us at John Lewis. So, India and Vietnam. So China is about volume. can do anything really in candles, but if you want to go more mid to premium, you'd be looking at India and Vietnam, and they do a huge range of the soy and eco candles and very beautiful votifs. In terms of that, they're more artisanal, they're more handcrafted, more about environmental. We work with a company called Voluspa, so a perfect example. It's an American company, and America does produce a lot of candles as well. And Voluspa, for those of you who know it, it's in Anthropology in the UK, but it's just come back into the UK, and they have beautiful ornate glass that you reuse again. So if their candle is also soy, everything about it's natural. So the incentive is that you buy this product and then you reuse the votive as a vase or something else, and you will see lots in the gifting area of sustainable candles and how that category is moving on, but a really critical one. In terms of nearshore sourcing, so again, we were talking about yesterday managing and mitigating your sourcing risks, so not having everything in one country. So if you're sourcing volume out of China, you may then source your mid to premium in Europe, and you have all the benefits of lack of tariffs, the ability to repeat in seasons. And candles, we took about 60% of our sales in December alone on candles. So in the final 4 weeks, it was something that came very late. If you want to repeat in season, you want to have a category where you can go back quickly and get more product. So France and Germany are known for having luxury scented candles, lots of eco. They also are very good at giving you your own individual scents. So like they'll have perfumers or fragrance builders who can actually build specific bespoke fragrances for you. So if you're looking for something that is bespoke and that differentiates you from the rest of the market and your scents, or you want to link it with your hand cream, then working in Europe is where you can get amazing mid to premium quality in candles. And lovely to be able to mention, you can actually source in the UK. So if you are starting off in the candle business, the UK has a number of amazing candle suppliers. We used a lot of them in John Lewis for our own brand. So we would go to China for real volume and the tea light end. We would go to Europe and Belgium for our mid to premium. And we would go to UK for premium scented candles, and also for some of our huge own range, where it was really important to us the quality of what they were going to produce. And in terms of ethical and sustainability, what you got in the UK is very high, because the standards in the UK are incredibly high. They have to check everything much more than you'll see in any other country. So they have something called the REACH regulations. I don't know if anyone has heard of those. So that's basically the registration, the evaluation, the authorization, restriction of chemicals, very, very important, and then classification of that candle, the label and packaging that goes with it. So very, very strong testing on that, and certification. You've obviously got no tariffs, and you've got all the agility of sourcing in the UK. Now, clearly, it's going to be mainly at mid to premium price points that you're going to source UK candles. You can get lower, but if you're really going for low volume, you're going to be looking to go far ashore, whether it's China for volume or whether it's India for more artisanal. So just being aware of who is my customer in all of this, what bottom line margin do I need, how much stock do I want to hold at one point, what are my minimum order quantities, all of those factors you need to take into account before you decide, right, this is the place that I'm going to source. And it may be that you blend your sourcing. We talked quite a lot about blended sourcing yesterday, where you can blend your margins. So you blend your sourcing with a combination of near and far shore, and you blend your margins. So you might be making 75% in what you're getting in volume from China, but it's at low price points. But you then make a 50 or 60% margin in Europe or near shore, which is a really healthy margin. So candles are a high margin category. What you want to do is clearly sell as many at full price. So think about your exit strategy and where you need to be too, because you will sell huge amounts in the final golden quarter, as we called it at John Lewis, in November, December. You will also, if you have natural candles, sell a lot in January when people are doing the New Year, New You, and the more holistic thing. So one of the key brands we grew at John Lewis was Neom, and there's an example of a candle brand who came quite late into the market, but had a very, very clear USP. It was about wellness and well-being, and they linked their scents to that. So the marketing is really, really important in terms of what your brand equity looks like a candle, because the choice is vast. So if you're going to stand out, you need to really clearly think about, what's my point of view on this? How do I look different? And whether that's the candle and the sustainability of it, or whether it's the votive and the reusing of it. So very important. Okay, moving on to ceramics, another category which is absolutely enormous. And again, ceramics sourcing, it's very, very wide. So it depends on the substrate of what you are sourcing. Is it stoneware? Is it bone china? Is it porcelain? What kind of volume am I going to be looking at? Is it dinnerware? Is it mugs? So lots of different things that you need to take into account when you're sourcing on ceramics. You also need to think about regulations on ceramics as well, particularly if it's dinnerware and if somebody's going to be eating off it, making sure that it's fit for purpose from that. And also, if you're looking for volume and the way that people live today, you don't want to be sourcing ceramics that have to be hand washed too much because people won't do it. So actually, is it dishwasher safe? How does that work? So all of those things, depending on the price point, are all the decisions you need to make before you decide how you're going to source. And again, you can source in the UK. I mean, the UK is very famous for having Stoke-on-Trent, which is all about China, but that's very mid to premium. So if you're looking for a mid to premium distinctive range of China, you will be sourcing in the UK. If you're looking for volume, the UK is not going to be the right place. The other key thing that the UK can really help with, and particularly in the gift arena, we have helped a number of clients, is when people want to go from 2D to 3D. So they might be an artist who does lots of stationery and cards, and their artwork is beautiful, and they want to then put it on mugs. You can quite easily source bone china mugs from the UK and Scotland and Dunoon and places like that allows you to test whether your ceramics can work. You can work on tiny MOQs. The price point will be mid to premium, but it allows you to really, really test the market and see whether your prints work in 3D. So a really useful first source for sourcing in the UK. However, if you're going for volume, it's not going to be the UK, it's going to be China again. And then the biggest supporters of the China market in the world. And they can do anything. So they can do all price points. Porcelain is the one that's the key volume that they can do really well. They can do decals on it. They can do any colors. They can do glazes. So China is a real opportunity to do it. They have real expertise. Always ensure the QC is in place and that your briefing is really, really clear if you're sourcing China in China. Moving on. Italy and Portugal, very well known. So again, we had a very blended strategy at John Lewis. So I was head of tabletop, and we had a blended strategy where our core volume would generally come from China, but our more decorative mid to premium price points would come from nearer shore, i.e. Italy and Portugal. And what Italy and Portugal do is they have exceptional craftsmanship, sometimes hand-painted, handcrafted. So if you're looking for something where you want to get a little bit more distinction in something, we would have our own brand and we'd send our own designs, get Italy and get them hand-painted, which is much more efficient than doing it in the UK, which would be too expensive, but they had the handy craft to do it. And obviously nearer shore, so you could manage the MOQs and you could manage the volumes as well. So Italy and Portugal, both very good in terms of decorative ceramics. Portugal does much more in terms of functional ceramics, and we tended to go to the Porto area. So you would have at one end a company that was based on the Toyota principle, like a car factory, that could literally, it was all robots, there was no one in the factory at all, which was odd to see in the middle of Porto. But they could produce 10,000 mugs a day with all the handles in exactly the same place because a robot did it. So we went from that extreme with our white core John Lewis best-selling ranges, beautifully contemporary styling, really great quality, but done at pace and volume. And then you would go down to the next factory, which would be more about the artisanal side, that you would see more stoneware, more crafted, more glazing and crackle glazes and textures. So really both ends of the scale in Portugal and very easy to source in. Again, Thailand is really growing for ceramics, a market that does beautiful quality. They can do traditional dinnerware and pottery. They're really they're growing in their capacity for volume as well, and it's definitely a market where we were looking for something that was mid-volume, but was looking for a technique on it that we couldn't get from China. So very distinctive burnished crackle glaze is something we would use for serve, where we would tend to go to somewhere like Thailand and would get amazing quality, and also very eco-friendly, so big investment for the government in eco-friendly practices in Thailand. So there's a real growing focus there. So it was a country that is really, really growing for the China ranges that you can source there. Great quality, great style, and great traditional product. Vietnam as well, really, really growing. And I mentioned this yesterday, and I think I mentioned earlier, because of the tariffs in China, there's been quite a lot of factories in China switching to Vietnam because there's no tariffs from Vietnam. So you're seeing quite a shift from China to Vietnam. And the benefit of Vietnam is that they have amazing compliance, amazing quality, great logistics, all the benefits that you can get, and they can do the techniques that you require. So a really useful growing market, and one to absolutely watch in terms of China production. So final category is textile. So again, a very, very different category than the other ones. And again, it's the same thing. Be very clear about what you want to source where in terms of what's your price point, who's your customer demographic, how much volume do you need, how much margin do you need, how much design and technique, because this is a huge category. Textiles, everything from fabrics right through to cushions. But in terms of China is the largest producer of textiles. So in terms, again, of our volume core ranges, so basic bed linen would be coming through from someone like China. If we were looking for something with more embellishment, something that's more ornate, something that's like velvets or fabrics, we would tend to go to India. But China is very good for producing unbelievable core volume. India and Bangladesh, we would tend to go to for sort of genuinely a lot more of the applied techniques that you would need, and obviously things like rugs and cushions and things come from Bangladesh. Bangladesh is a market that is absolutely growing at pace at the minute. The government has invested a lot of money into Bangladesh. There is hopeful things of free trade coming, but in terms of fashionability and ability to turn things quickly, Bangladesh is absolutely winning. So a number of the big companies that I mentioned before, where you can see where they source, like the Zara's and H&M on home, if you look at where they're sourcing quite a lot of their homeware products from India and Bangladesh, because they can get beautiful contemporary fashion product. And while India is not near, it's nearer than China, and it's sort of nearer shore, so you can get quicker repeats if you're in India as well. So, and given all the disruption that there is with freight, a lot of people are looking at India and the disruption with tariffs, and India and Bangladesh, as I say, are in the throes of negotiating a free trade agreement. So just thinking about that. So it's really growing. And the other key thing that Bangladesh and India do is they really focus on environmental and sustainability. So that's something they have really, really put a lot of attention on. So they do a lot of organic cotton and organic fabrics and silks and naturals. So those countries are absolutely growing. Italy, again, as you see in ceramics, if you're in Italy porcelain, you're probably doing mid to premium, and we bought a lot of our textiles. So on bed linens and fabrics like wool and silk, we would buy from Italy. They're obviously near sourcing. They have great quality. They are very, very easy to deal with. They are phenomenal at things like leather. So things like leather puffies, cushions like that would all come from Italy. Homewares would come from Italy. So a lot of furniture we would buy in Italy, lovely quality leather on sofas would come from Italy. Same from Portugal, very, very high quality, the ability to be really flexible, the ability to be agile, and for Portugal you can buy in that sort of mid to premium market. So a huge proportion of what we sourced on our mid to premium would come from Italy and Portugal, and Turkey the same. Turkey very, very powerful, growing at a rate of knots. Unbelievable in terms of organic. So if you're going to buy, if you see organic towels, they've invariably come from India or probably Turkey. If they're very ornate and have got quite a lot of embellishment and texture, they're probably going to come from Turkey. So those countries are really, really growing in what they do. So key thing on sourcing, and I appreciate that was really fast. The key things still apply when you are sourcing across the world. Be very, very clear about what you need and what the market demand is, and that's the same for every category, because that will dictate where you're going to source, what's the demand for your product, how much volume are you going to buy, who is your customer, where are you going to pitch it. Your supplier selection is really, really important. We've got it twice there, it's so important. I've just noticed a typo. So supplier selection is really important, and how you're going to work with that supplier. So we were talking about this yesterday. It's really, really important to build relationships with your suppliers, build long-term relationships, but also to be a little bit less risk averse and look at new sources, because if you look at new sources, and we've got lots of them here today, and they've all been vetted by the Hive team. If you look at new sources, you can sometimes get into a factory very early, and we find in John Lewis, if we got into factories very early, we got distinctive and different products that gave us exclusivity that no one else had. So absolutely worth looking and trialing and testing with new factories. Test them on not huge volumes to start with, but if you get in early, you can build partnerships with them. So not always being safe and sourcing in the same places you've always sourced, being aware that the world is moving, because there's lots of other countries that are growing that I haven't mentioned here. Africa is really growing in this across many continents. Egypt is absolutely insane. The government have invested a lot of money into Egypt, as have the Americans. Egypt is great at organic cotton and things like that. Easy to deal with, free trade. So thinking, really stretch your mind in terms of where you could source for all of these categories and where their expertise is. Clearly, compliance and safety regulations on all categories, but notably toys. You absolutely want to make sure that that's all in really good shape. And ethical and sustainable sourcing, it's the buzzwords that you hear all the time, and that's why I mentioned Fabicas. Transparency is going to be really important in the future. People want to know where these sources are coming from. Again, we spoke about the fact that free trade is one of the top 5 beliefs that governments say will unlock poverty in the world. And they're saying, actually, we don't want tariffs and we don't barriers. If you want to unlock poverty, encourage free trade, which is why Brexit was quite a shock to a lot of countries. We actually want to encourage countries to be able to trade, because that actually lifts the whole country, not just people at the top end. So important, and you'll see there's a real drive to getting more free trade across the world to enhance everyone's lives. Logistics and shipping, really critical. Sometimes getting the product is the easy bit. Actually, physically getting it from A to Z is the tough bit, and we talked quite a lot about that yesterday. So really understanding what it's going to take to get that product that you're really excited and have designed from either here from China back or India back, and making sure that all the steps along the line are covered and that you can still make a profit when you do that. So all that needs to be factored into your model. Pricing and profit margins, clearly, sales are for vanity, profits for sanity. So you need to make sure you're going to make some money on it, and how you do that, you need to think about your exit strategy. So it seems a bit negative, but when you're buying product, make sure you understand how much you're going to sell at full price. What's your exit strategy? If 50% of it doesn't sell at full price, can you afford it? So again, we talked about managing overproduction yesterday, not overbuying, because if you overbuy, you'll end up having to exit a lot of products. So you would have what we would call a blended margin, in the way that you might sell a lot of volume at 70%, but some of it, 30% of what you buy, you might only sell at 30%, but the blended margin is enough for you to make a profit. So managing the numbers right from the outset and saying, okay, what if I sell 60% at this price, 40 at this, manage how you think you're going to get your end margin, and that will dictate where you source, how you source, and how much you buy. So really important that you do that up front. And trademarks and licensing, making sure in the countries that you're dealing with that those are really critically covered, because if you don't, it will cost you a lot of money if you get done for trademark. So making sure that you're very clear that the product is yours, and you've got the provenance of it, and you've got the designs, and they're signed off, and you're really clear that it's your design work that you've done. And clearly customer feedback and reviews. And by customers, I also mean your suppliers. And we talked about this yesterday. The biggest learn I had in my very long time at John Lewis is that when you build strong relationships with your suppliers, long-term, open, honest, long-term relationships, you get so much more out of it. I was head of supplier management at one point, and it wasn't the right job for me at all, because it was all about data and just asking suppliers for cash once we'd taken sales. What I was much better at was building joint business plans with customers and saying, how do we grow together? Because what I would say to my teams, if you negotiate too hard and it's a bad deal for the supplier, in the long term, it's a bad deal for you. Because if they're not making enough out of it, they're not going to help you when things get difficult. And COVID was the perfect example, because we had long-term relationships with suppliers. When things get tough, we could ring the supplier and say, look, we have a problem with stock. Can you help us out? We're not asking you to lose it all, but can you delay it, or can you help us, or can you lose it? And we were told afterwards that we were really one of the few companies who actually actively had conversations with suppliers rather than just cutting volumes. So long-term, when things get better, those suppliers are there for you. And I said this yesterday, people buy from people. It's all about relationships. So making sure that you understand the relationship that you're getting into, you've had great conversations with that suppliers, and you feel confident that the right person you're dealing with for you, particularly, it's all good when things are good, but when things are difficult, how do I manage that? And open communication is the critical part in that. We always said to suppliers, tell us if things are going wrong. Don't hide it from us. Tell us early, and then we can deal with it. And we won't fine you if you tell us there's a reason for you being late or there's a problem with it. But the communication piece is really, really critical. I'll finish. I'm very well known for my quotes, I was talking about digital passports and Fabicus and a transparency of sourcing. But I mean, people buy from people, and this famous quote on the supply chain said, "There is no more B2B." Or B2C, so business to business or business customers. It's H to H, human to human. And if you work with the human relationship part of your sourcing strategy and you're open and honest in your communication, you will both thrive and win at the end of it. Cool. Any questions? I'm happy to take questions, or I'm happy to take questions afterwards, if anybody has any. Yep. Where's this quote from? It's not named, but it's from a sourcing quote. It's from I was talking yesterday, I read lots of books. I'm a lifelong learner, and it's from a business book. Yeah. But yeah, thank you. Any other questions? I'm conscious that was a lot of information very quickly, but the video will be available sort of longer term if anybody needs it. And if anybody wants to ask anything when I'm finished, I'm very happy to. I think that the video will be available via Hive, will it? Yeah. Yeah, we'll share it. Cool. Okay, thank you.